about what is going on around the destruction of Christianity in Ukraine. September 30 was to have seen the first session of the Sixth Appeal Administrative Court in Kiev on the case submitted by the State Service of Ukraine on Ethnic Policy and Freedom of Conscience to stop the activities of the Kiev Archdiocese of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church. The attempts of the Zelensky regime caused a wide response both in and outside Ukraine. On September 26th, we learned that experts in the human rights organization International Justice for All documented systematic and outrageous persecution of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, and in a complaint that they sent to the UN back in February 11th, 2025. Their complaint contains descriptions of cases against the metropolitans of Cherkassk and Kanevsk Fedosi, of Vyshegorsk and Chernobyl Pavel, of Svetogorsk Arseny, of Banchensk, Longin, and Evgeny Koshelnik, journalists and human rights defenders. As a response, 7 UN special rapporteurs on May 14th sent to the government of Ukraine an official notification confirming the violation of the international law. They reminded that the freedom of religion is an absolute and inalienable right, even during an armed conflict. On August 13th, this NGO sent to the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom an information note with the request to hold hearings about persecution of Christians in Ukraine, and recommended to include Ukraine in the list of countries of special concern. On September 29th, the lawyers of the Metropolitan Cherkassk and Kanevsk Fedosi filed to abolish all forms of detention because the Metropolitan needed to go to Geneva to give personal accounts to the UN special rapporteurs. The visit of the Metropolitan to Geneva is scheduled to early October during the 60th session of the UN HRC. On September 29th, the leader of the young branch of the U.S. Republican Party, Katrin Whiteford, addressed the Ukrainian judges and asked them to defend justice. I'll tell you the quote. "Don't give in to pressure and don't become a tool of political repressions. Defend the law, not the tyranny. Let the officials know America and the whole world is looking at you. The responsibility is to come," she said. At the same time, she quoted the words of Donald Trump during his remarks at the UNGA on September 23rd. "Let us defend free speech and free expression. Let us protect religious liberty, including for the most persecuted religion on the planet today. It's called Christianity." End of quote. We don't hope that words of many people to defend the Ukrainian Orthodox Church will be heard in Kiev, because he knows what he does. At the same time, the criminal character and meaningless of attempts to outlaw the oldest religion in the country is clear. Here we see the unique videos from New York all over the world.
It's a great example of what the Kiev regime is doing. I'm talking about their propaganda. You've probably noticed it. The propaganda television of Ukraine, controlled by Zelensky, showed allegedly pictures from the UN General Assembly Hall with many people in the hall listening to the words of their leader. Well, you've seen it. You've seen Zelensky speak, and indeed, those are real records of him speaking at the 80th session of the UN General Assembly in New York. And these very pictures in Ukraine were accompanied by pictures of allegedly multiple delegates listening to Zelensky. The problem is the hall was half empty in reality, and those are the realities of modern time. We see broadcast in Ukraine on the website of the United Nations organizations, and along with this broadcast, we see statements by heads of delegations on the websites of the ministries. Not everyone is present in the halls. There are note takers. There are those who listen to the statements in their official representatives or even in their countries. That's the world of today. And despite all this, although everyone knows about the practices that has established itself in the UN of the past years, nonetheless, the Ukraine propaganda doesn't shy away from any means. Why is this example so telling? Because it's exactly in the same way that they are fooling the peoples of Ukraine on other issues, on the situation on the battlefield, on the economy, on the humanitarian affairs. Everything is presented by the propaganda in exactly the same manner and spirit. Even more, there was an impression that the footprint broadcast in Ukrainian propaganda television were added by artificial intelligence. Well, it's up to experts to look into it, but those who are really interested in how it was can look up the real chronicles. All these facts and many facts we're going to present today confirm that the tasks regarding the identification and demilitarization of Ukraine remain relevant, and these tasks will be achieved. Now, as to the children's issue, which the Bankova Street so loves to talk about, on the 29th of September, in the so-called Security Forum, which is a farce because there is no security in Ukraine, Zelensky spoke about the children stolen in Russia. He said how hard it was to find dozens of thousands of minors who, according to Zelensky, are illegally concealed or hidden by Russia. Yes, indeed, it's hard to find a black cat in a black room, particularly if it isn't there. Zelensky should have informed the audience about repressive methods of his criminal regime instead, who fight minors when their personal data is added on the extremist website called Mirotvorets. Recently, the names of minor children emerged on this website. 13 minors are now targets for elimination by the Kiev regime. The youngest of them is 9 years old. Russia is doing everything to make sure the separated children reunite with their families. This mechanism of reunification has long ago been established and is working successfully. Zelensky can't but know it, as there are direct contacts of Russian officials in charge with the Ukrainian side. Today's results look the following way. 115 minors were reunified with their families in Ukraine and in third countries, and 28 children returned to Russia. I would like to remind you that during the second round of negotiations in Istanbul on the 2nd of June, the delegation of Ukraine handed over to us a list of 339 children. 339 children. It's not thousands, it's not dozens of thousands of children, it's not millions of children, it's just 339 names. According to the Ukrainian documents, they are searched by their families. 1/3 of the list was irrelevant. We are working on the rest. If Kiev regime has information about dozens of thousands of Ukrainian children, why don't they hand these lists over to us? I'm talking now to the citizens of Ukraine. Demand them to publish what they are talking about. They publish the personal data on children. I give you the example of Mirotvorets website. Why don't they publish the data of children who are allegedly sought by their families? Because it is only a comedy. They are not searching for children. They only play this trump. It is nothing but lie what Zelensky is talking about. What's most terrible, he knows full well about it. In his statement in Warsaw, he said publicly that such a list of children, he doesn't possess such a list of children at this stage. Why? Because this list is only to be drawn up. Have you ever heard anything of the sort? If from day one of the conflict they've been saying that dozens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, or millions of children are looked after, why over 3.5 years haven't they been able to draw up this list? I'll reiterate, it's because there are no thousands, dozens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, or millions of some children lost in Ukraine. If it's due to the actions of the Kiev regime, they haven't been recorded or haven't been registered, then the Kiev regime has to report to Ukrainians why it is not performing its obligations in the social field, why the Ministry of Interior is not working, and it shouldn't be blamed on other countries. In essence, in Warsaw, Zelensky admitted that the figures he has voiced are irrelevant. He continues to lie about children who returned from Russia. He's talking about 1,600 children. Can you imagine? Why these figures? Where do they come from? Where has he found 1,485 people that Ukraine allegedly found and returned from Russia? Where are the records? Where are the names of these children? Where are the facts? Where is the evidence? Each and every case of reunification of children with their families is verified if it happens through the existing channels, including by international mediators. And it's not possible to bring out of the country such an amount of children without the knowledge of Russian authorities. Our authorities know nothing about 1,500 of minors. It is just another shameless invention. Probably these children existed, but probably they were not in Russia. Then Zelensky should speak the entire truth. Probably they were in the countries of the European Union, in the NATO countries in Western Europe. There have been reports, public reports, about the children who really are, about the many Ukrainian children who were unrecorded or lost or brought out of Ukraine and left in the countries of Western Europe. So they should say the entire truth, that 1,500 minors were returned to Ukraine from NATO countries. They should say how they were returned. These figures, I'm talking about the number of Ukrainian children lost in the territories of Western Europe, are available to Western human rights defenders. They were openly available, and they emerged on the specific websites. Exactly the same figures of the number of children who were separated from their children in the NATO countries were available to Ukrainian human rights defenders. Why? Because from Ukraine, entire orphan houses are brought out from Ukraine to Western Europe. And Zelensky didn't say anything about it. But we'll add that these children are brought out of Ukraine with the assistance of the spouse by Mr. Zelensky, but nobody speaks about it, neither him nor her. They do so deliberately. Except first that we deal with another campaign staged by Kiev with the support of the West. They disseminate anti-Russian narratives on the children issue. They created an entire coalition to return Ukrainian children, and another gathering took place on the 23rd of September in New York during the high-level week of the 80th session of the General Assembly. Sound people have long ago realized that these gatherings have nothing in common with the real care for children and simply discredit their participants. The issues related to children are emotional and sensitive, so the Zelensky regime just exploits these issues, and the real problems of Ukraine are not what they care about. And I would like to speak on the topic that I mentioned in the beginning, and I told you that I'm going to get back to it. On the 30th of September, the citizen population of Donbass expressed their rejection to the Russophobic politics of the Kiev regime, the neo-Nazi regime that came to power as a result of coup d'etat and for 8 years waged a real war of elimination against their own citizens, calling them non-humans or subhumans. I don't want even to repeat it, but I have to. I'm forced to record it for history. The population in these regions took over the responsibility for their future and determined their future in full compliance with the UN Charter and the fundamental principles of international law. Today, in the new Russian regions, despite the difficult military-political environment in the area of the special military operation, peaceful life is being restored. Yes, it happens differently. Yes, it's not easy. Yes, it happens with pain, with sorrow. Thanks to heroic deeds by the population, I'm talking about civilians, but nonetheless, the peaceful life has been restored. There have been created favorable conditions for investors. A free economic zone was established with a special legal regime for effective implementation of investment projects. In order to facilitate international trade in the ports of Mariupol and Berdansk, we intend to open control points through the checkpoints through the state border. Donbass and Novorossiya have vast industrial potential. There are great industrial plants for coal production and processing, for metallurgy, machine construction, and energy plants, pharmaceutical and chemical and food production plants. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs contributes to the enhancement of contacts between foreign investors with these regions. On the 22nd of September, agreements on trade and economic cooperation were signed between the Donetsk and Lugansk People's Republics, Zaporozhye and Kherson Oblasts with the Republic of Nicaragua. These agreements open a path for establishment of cooperation in the real field, including direct ties between economic operators, and it will help them provide support for the development of cooperation. On the 22nd of September, the government of Sevastopol and the Foreign Ministry of Nicaragua signed an agreement about cooperation in the trade and economic field on science and social and humanitarian issues, and it will contribute to multi-faceted cooperation with Nicaraguan partners, and it will create conditions for the Nicaraguan investors to enter Sevastopol plants and the local market. From the 12th to the 15th of September, head of the Kherson Oblast paid a visit to Belarus, where he was received by President Lukashenko. From the 29th of September to the 1st of October, head of the Lugansk People's Republic, Leonid Pasachnik, attended the International Expo Inoprom Belarus in Minsk. Earlier, some enterprises of the Donetsk People's Republic reached agreements on cooperation with the leading Belarus partners. Minsk automotive plant, Mogilev Liftmarsh, Amkodor, a pharmaceutical company, and so on. The drafting of an agreement between the Donetsk People's Republic and the Republic of South Ossetia is underway. The Russian Foreign Ministry informs the population of foreign countries about the modern life of the new regions. Some of our embassies show photo exhibitions, Mariupol 2022-2025, and new regions in some of our embassies. There have been lots of questions about the situation around the so-called elections in Moldova. They could really compete with the elections in Romania. It is a good occasion to think about where manipulation with democracy can lead along the Western lines. It can't be described as anything but a circus. On the 28th of September, well, how can I say that elections were held? There was an attempt to hold parliamentary elections. How can we describe as elections what we all have observed? Moldova political analysts were quite direct in their assessments. They called them farce and imitation. I believe the operation to save the Chisinau regime would be the best definition. It is a real circus. Methods were used which have nothing in common with freedom and democracy. The entire arsenal of anti-methods were used, such as political pressure, intimidation, threats and blackmailing. According to the estimates of human rights defenders, law enforcement agencies held about 580 searches and they detained dozens of people. Have you ever seen such elections anywhere? Opposition parties and entire blocks were excluded from the race, even on the day of the election. Have you ever seen something like that? Entrepreneurs and their teams were forced to vote for the ruling party, otherwise they could face a stop of subsidies and loans from the US. Politics and officials from the EU during their visits to Chisinau promoted and asked to vote for the ruling party. De facto, it was blackmailing. They said the funding from Brussels would only flow if the ruling party will remain at power. The people need this money from Brussels, which in turn dictates its political will to it. It's our country that Moldova authorities groundlessly accused of attempts to influence the voters.
That did not help. Inside Moldova, the ruling party lost to its competitors and received 44.14%. They lost 3% in comparison with the previous parliamentary elections in 2021. The rest of the vote that they needed, almost 30%, were received thanks to the Western diaspora. There were 280 polling stations, but the opinion of people of the Moldovan diaspora in Russia were not interesting for Chisinau. Our country had only 2 polling stations. Our country has always said, open up as many polling stations as you need. Will ensure security. Logistics will be good. But no, only 2 polling stations. Why? Because the number of ballots for people on the territory of our country, in Sander's opinion, had to be restricted. For Dniester region, the number of polling stations were decreased to 12, and the access was as difficult as possible. The experts point out that the falsified character of the elections is evident. The NGO Promolex registered 997 cases of the violations of the election process, while during the previous parliamentary elections there were only 459 such cases. Political scientists point out that at the beginning of the day of voting, there was a significant margin belonged to the opposition, but later on, while the protocols were counted, the system of Central Election Commission started to regularly stop responding. After that, the figures started to be in favor of the ruling forces. There's a gap between the official data of the Central Election Committee of Moldova and the protocols on certain polling stations. The processing of protocols lasted almost the whole night, while the voting finished by midnight, probably because they are afraid to receive evaluations, the real evaluation of the anti-democratic actions. Officials in Chisinau refused accreditation to all short-term observers from Russia as part of the OSCE ODIHR mission, as well as the observers from the public chamber of the Russian Federation. A special topic is the voting in the Western countries. At the election day, the social networks saw a lot of information about voters being taken en masse to the stations, about ballot boxes being partly full at the beginning of the day, and ballots that were put by one and the same people. The videos of the elections split even more the Moldovan society that was already very, very polarized. The supporters of the opposition in Moldova said that they don't recognize the outcomes of the voting. On September 29, the Patriotic Bloc held a rally in the center of Chisinau against falsification and sent 45 complaints to the Central Election Committee regarding the violations during the parliamentary elections. The authorities responded with the only thing they can do, with repressions. On September 30, there was a series of searches within ostensibly a criminal case regarding the illegal financing of political parties and money laundering. The same day, the court in Chisinau pronounced verdict to former MP, the member of the opposition bloc, Victory Marina Tauber, She was given 7.5 years in prison with the confiscation of property and ban to hold public posts for 5 years. In May 2024, she was given the Russian Order of Friendship for the achievements in strengthening peace, friendship, cooperation, and mutual understanding between the peoples. Probably this is her main crime for the Chisinau regime. Instead of the liberty and democracy that were promised, and instead of the economic, as they promised, well-being, the republic is plunged more and more into poverty, into terrible times of the Middle-Aged Inquisition, and turn into a colony of the West. Amid this, we're concerned seriously about the fate of ordinary Moldovans who became hostages in their own country of the anti-national policy of the pro-Western elites that usurped the power, and the West masters who conduct elaborate neo-colonial experiments in Moldova. We received an equal amount of questions, despite the fact that we regularly shared comments with you regarding what is going on at the UN Security Council around Iran action program and so on. We prepared a full answer to some of your questions. We can see how the leading media started to promote aggressively in the public space the UN restrictions on Iran, that they were abolished within the resolution 2231. In terms of the Western propaganda, the sanctions resolution that were in place until 2015 is still effective, and this was the result, according to the Western propaganda, of the review of the complaint of Tehran's non-compliance with their commitment. Great Britain, Germany, France, and the US that are behind them quote this as the reason to restore the sanctions. But amid all this hysteria that we see in the Western media, and it shows that those who are behind it understand that their position is legally flawed. The Secretariat put information on the website about the restoration of sanctions against Iran. This is one more example how the Secretariat acts in violation of the international law and goes beyond their mandate. The Security Council did not make any decisions that give the Secretariat to give judgments regarding such serious issues. Everyone knows that Great Britain, Germany, and France, and I'm not about the train car where we saw drugs on a white handkerchief. They don't have legal grounds for the restoration. They did not want to comply with 2023 plan. They even consciously circumvented the snapback mechanism, the reverse process. that is why the General Secretary, on August 28, the General Secretary received the complaint of these three countries, and this complaint cannot be reviewed within the topic. Essentially, what these three countries did, this false system of actions, is a manipulation. But the main victim for now of these manipulations is the United Nations, that is being jeopardized by the Secretariat and make a fool of themselves. Evaluations of the situation were given by Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov during the statement within the general debate at the 18th session of the UNGA at his press conference following the high-level week on September 28th. Also, it was mentioned by other statements of our representative. The snapback mechanism that we are talking about cannot be considered effective. Saying otherwise means distorting the reality. We cannot add anything to this, besides the fact that we are concerned with the policy of the West, who hide behind the empty words with their commitment to diplomacy, international law, but in fact they exacerbate the situation around Iran's nuclear program. Yet again, this causes not only pity but concerns regarding those people in the Secretariat who participate in the manipulations of the West on the behalf of the Secretariat, on the UN. No one instructed them to do so. This is a textbook example. I think it will be found in books later on, and all this manipulative aspiration of the Western countries to do as they want are not supported by those who experience pressure from the Western countries. Other countries did not respond to this provocation and initiate at the UN. Those who opposed the prolongation of the sanctions regime could not explain why they want this. This is one more story about what is going behind closed doors in the Western countries to destroy the United Nations. All of this deserves a strong condemnation. The sanction practices used by the West that they wanted to legitimize by abusing the authority of the United Nations shows that there are the discussion of these issues are important. The West in general and those who experience pressure from them or supported by them, they do not want to see them. Let us say out loud the question that needed to be answered. If the Secretariat got themselves into its situation, they'd better start commenting on this. Why do we have to restore the sanctions if the aims were reached long ago? This is documented by the IAEA. Even more, I'll remind you the words of high-level statements, for example, the president, that there are no facilities, if there are no aims, and what are the aims that the West wants to achieve by using such legal mechanisms? Is it admissible to introduce sanctions for an unlimited period of time? I think it's a very good question, especially when we remember that over many years the West have been doing around North Korea. That means that against one country can experience two contradictory policies. First, the restoration of restrictions, and then the resolution 2231. It is still effective. It is a very good set of questions for specialists in international law in the UN Secretariat. And this is only the beginning. To start the discussion, we have much more of them. And as a response, we always hear only one thing from the Westerners. Iran, as the West says, mustn't have nuclear weapons. I'm sorry. This response is not relevant because no one has never said otherwise. The Iranians themselves articulated clearly their position. It's enough to see the statement of the president of Iran during one of the UNJ sessions. Iran is not happy with the nuclear regime. IAEA try to dictate everyone who has the right for peaceful use of nuclear energy. That is why all the story with snapback mechanism started. This is a very vivid example, especially for the specialists in international law, of those how international legal framework is destroyed by the Westerners. By the way, this is the very proof, unfortunately the best one. I regret that it exists, but it does exist, that the Westerners would like to substitute international law with a rules-based world order. They started to say quite quickly that their rules-based world order is the international law. But no, it is a simulation of the international law. It's a classic substitution. When some new orders are introduced, no one knows what they are. They aren't articulated anywhere. They are never discussed, but they are presented as a traditional system of legality and order. This is a classic Western manipulation to change the notions. And this story is one of the most vivid examples. All of this confirms that in terms of legal framework, this is a problem that doesn't help to find solution to the Iran's peaceful use of nuclear energy.
Iran opponents don't need a real negotiating process, which is a testament to their destructive policy. There have been questions about the situation in Madagascar. As you know, in the capital and large cities of Madagascar, protest movements are ongoing. There are clashes with law enforcement agencies, lootings and clashes. They were caused by the problems with water supply and power supply. The authorities in Madagascar cannot control the situation. So far, there are wounded and dead. There are no Russian citizens among them, according to our official information. The embassy in Antananarivo is following the situation. The Russian citizens on the island and in the capital in Antananarivo are recommended to be careful and avoid crowded areas. Tourists planning to visit Madagascar are also advised to refrain from traveling to the country until order is restored. There's been a desecration, an act of desecration of remains of Soviet soldiers in Estonia who gave their lives in fighting against the occupants. The exhumations were conducted without any arrangements with their families and relatives. These inhumane actions gravely violate the obligation of Estonia under Article 34 of Additional Protocol 1 to Geneva Conventions of the 12th of August 1949. According to the provisions of this document, the states that ratified them and signed them should treat with respect the burial sites of those who fell, who were killed as a result of hostilities on its territory. We also would like to remind you that under the law of the Russian Federation, there is a criminal responsibility for destruction or damaging military burial sites located abroad in particular. Lithuania and Latvia tried to eliminate everything related to their past. On the website of the ministry, we will soon publish a report which is entitled "On the Actions, or rather inactions, of the authorities of Italy, Germany and Japan, which lead to destruction and falsification of history, justification of fascism and its accomplices." The report demonstrates how the Nazi Germany, fascist Italy and military Japan developed templates which are applied today, how facts of historical past are whitewashed. Facts from the past of these three main partners under the alliance of the Axis countries, how they tarnish the role of the Soviet Union in achieving the victory, how they prevent celebrating the 9th of May in the territories of these states. It is a shameful fact in their history. I can only assume what the effect of this report will be, but it's better for them to know the truth. It's better for their citizens to understand who leads their countries and what ideology is being fed to them, rather than living without knowing the truth. Those who lived without knowing the truth in the 30s, in the years of the 20th century, paid a high price for being the victims of Nazi and fascist propaganda. I wouldn't like to see their relatives in the 21st century repeating their history. The political elites of these countries follow the patterns of the militarist regime of the 30s. We see revanchist ideas, particularly in Germany and in Japan. There are efforts to whitewash their criminal past. There is fight with anti-fascists, and there is support for neo-Nazi regimes in Kiev and Baltic states. Since 2022, for the third year in a row, these three former members of the true axis of evil, vote against the draft resolution of General Assembly, co-sponsored by Russia and other states, on combating glorification of Nazism, neo-Nazism, and other practices that contribute to fueling contemporary forms of racism, racial discrimination, xenophobia, and related intolerance. It's the first case in history when countries of Hitler coalition openly voted against the documents that condemned glorification of Nazism and different forms of racial discrimination. It is a bell that tolls for them, and everyone should be careful. The fact that these three countries who are responsible for the killings of dozens of millions of people, they vote against the resolution which requires prevention of the revival of Nazism, which brings us to the thought that we should better consider the ideological processes in these countries. Apparently, these countries don't want to listen to us, although we repeat it from day to day, and they apparently decided to ignore the obligations that they took over as they became members of the UN. And now my favorite subject, the double standards, which I would call it's different. We all remember there have been concerns in the Western Europe, and first and foremost in France, by the laws against foreign agents that were developed in our country in response to the actions taken by the West and US, which were aimed against the Russian Federation. There was hysteria in France that you can't even imagine. All sorts of things were said and published about us several years ago, that we departed allegedly from the liberties and freedoms, that we invented something new, and that nothing of the sort could happen to them because such a terrible thing allegedly could only happen in our country. Let me emphasize, in our country, the legislation about foreign agents was developed in response to what we saw since 2022, the legal arbitrariness against the citizens of Russia, and Russian public figures and journalists, when the United States applied their legislation that was developed in the later 30s of the past century. Now we are in 2025. Dear friends, I don't know whether you are going to be glad or sad. Probably you'll find it funny. From the 1st of October 2025, that is from yesterday, in France, there will be a public digital register where data about French citizens and French entities should be posted, which are engaged in promoting the interests of a foreign state. And since January 2026, those who are included in the register should 4 times a year report about the activities and fill in the documents about how they influence the decision makers. Applause to the LEC Palace. As far as we understand, this instrument was developed in accordance with the law adopted in 2024 about prevention of foreign interference, which is aimed at, I quote, prevention of external influence on the public opinion in the country, end of quote. Apparently it was, its prototype was the U.S. Foreign Agents Registration Act of 1938. Probably we wouldn't have commented on it because it's about the domestic French legislation. But there is a but. You know, there is one fundamental thing. We all remember the mass hysteria in European countries, and particularly in France, as our country developed its legal framework in order to deal with foreign agents. During the discreditation campaign aimed against our efforts, and it was a true discrimination campaign launched by the major French media, the Russian legislation in this field was demonized. I wonder, are we going to hear something similar about the French law and register I've mentioned from the French media? And I'll do everything in my power to remind the French public opinion how the Russian laws adopted in response to the use of laws on foreign agents applied against us, and in which French media they were criticized. And I wonder whether we are going to hear something from the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe. Are we going to hear anything in response to this document in different formats of the EU and NATO? And third, we all remember how the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of France and the Élysée Palace in social networks pointed to every aspect of life of our civil society. Are they going to write something about themselves? Are they going to criticize what's going on in their country? Well, I really doubt it. I have no doubt that the priority target of the new legislation will be those citizens of France who feel affinity to Russia, and sound politicians and experts who doubt the correctness of the policy conducted by the French authorities against Russia. Almost every positive statement about Russia is labeled as Kremlin propaganda. It's obvious for us that French authorities deliberately prepare the public opinion of the country for long-term opposition to Russia, and they have monopoly on the public opinion and zero tolerance to a different point of view, which is different from the official opinion in France. This new register is just another step on this dangerous path. And let me assure you, we will not only follow the situation, but we're going to enjoy every piece of news on this occasion, because this occasion was given to us by the French authorities back in the time. Tomorrow, on the 3rd of October, marks 35 years since the so-called reunification of Germany, which was officially declared after the Treaty on the establishment of the German unity between the two parts of Germany entered into force in 1990. It was signed on the 31st of August 1990. The country was divided after World War II. After the end of the Cold War, Germany couldn't find back its unity. Thanks to the solid and principled position of our country, let me remind you that the USSR was against the separation of Germany. Do the Germans know about it? No, they know something different. Then it seemed to us that over the 45 years, Germans drew a lesson and had the right for sovereignty in a status of a single state. Unfortunately, Germany didn't pass this maturity test. It's hardly possible to speak about sovereignty and independent policy about the modern Germany. It might be paradoxical, but both parts of Germany were much more independent when taking the decisions than the modern-day Germany. The Germany doesn't even have a full-fledged constitution right now. It remains a split country, which remains to be split into the first and second sort citizens. Instead of reunification of the split population, the West German authorities chose the path to colonize the former Eastern Germany. They destroyed the successful industry and agriculture of the Eastern Germany. Many countries and many towns and villages were depopulated. Who live there are pensioners who are lied by the official propagation. According to the propaganda, they gave their life for serving the totalitarian communist regime. The Eastern Germans earn only 76% of what their Western colleagues earn. Do you remember how the Western propaganda said in the early 90s and in late 80s that they would live better after they fall under the influence of NATO and the EU? They said investment would immediately start flowing. Well, we see the results today. According to the German statistics, over the 35 years of the so-called Wunder, the population of Eastern areas was reduced from 17 million to 12.4 million, without taking into account the mass inflow of migrants after 2015. Saxony-Anhalt lost 26% and Thuringia lost 20% of the population. It's no doubt that it's no surprise that in Eastern Germany voters vote for the Alternative for Germany party that was declared as extremist party by the authorities. Eastern Germans who were born long after reunification of Germany don't feel themselves as full-fledged citizens of their country. Even official propaganda can't conceal it any longer. The official report about the state of German unity, this report was published in 2024, and it states that among the managers of different levels, those originating from the eastern regions only amount to 12%. Only 12.1%. In science, the figure is even lower, 8.3%, and in economy, it's a shameful figure of 4.5%. And the more the commander of the Bundeswehr, the amount equals 0. That's what I call reunification. Prime Minister of Saxony, Michael Kretschmer, lamented that among the soldiers, there are mostly those who originate from the east, while the most profitable orders are placed in the Western industrial plants. In this backdrop, the constant attempts of Germans to teach other countries and peoples how they should live look absurd. They should better care about themselves. They should better apply their human rights standards to themselves. Another good anniversary, 25 years ago, 25 years ago, the Declaration on Strategic Partnership was signed between the Republic of India and Russia. It was a milestone in the development of relations between Moscow and New Delhi, based on mutual respect, trust, and equal account for the interests of each other and the wish to promote a united non-confrontation agenda. Since then, we have reached the level of a special privileged strategic partnership. This year, we celebrate the 15 years anniversary of this strategic partnership. We have a dynamically developing trade and economic cooperation, close cultural and humanitarian ties, and mutual support in international arena. We have no doubt that time-tested friendship between Russia and India will strengthen and further on contribute to a prosperity of two states and contributing to the stability in Asia and in the world.
We received questions regarding the parade. It's an internal event. nevertheless, on September the 20th, Belgrade saw a military parade titled "The Power of Unity," dedicated to the Day of Serbian Unity. This we see it as a demonstration of determination and the ability of Serbia to defend the sovereignty and territorial integrity. Russia is prepared to continue with facilitating defense capabilities of the country. On September 23rd through 27th, New York received a Russian delegation on international youth cooperation led by the deputy head of the Federal Agency for Youth Affairs, Yegor Litvinenko. The delegation was consisted from the representatives of relevant departments of the Foreign Ministry of Russia, as well as the Council of Young Diplomats, the Russian movement, the movement of the First, and the Association of Volunteer Centers. During the statements at the plenary and the working sessions of the session of high level dedicated to the 30 years of World Program of Action for Youth, Russian delegates shared best practices in youth politics. On the sidelines, there were bilateral meetings with the delegations of Burkina Faso, Venezuela, China, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, Uzbekistan, as the leadership of permanent missions of Armenia, India, and Kazakhstan to the UN. Russia actively reinforces the efforts to provide humanitarian aid to African countries, even through the international organizations. The key channel is the World Food Organization to follow up on the outcomes of the first Russia-Africa Summit in 2019. Our country, every year since 2020, have been paying an additional contribution worth $10 million to the WFO to provide humanitarian assistance to African states. In 2024, Zambia, Zimbabwe, Mozambique, Namibia, Niger, and Republic of Sudan received aid through this channel. On October the 8th, through the port of Beira, Mozambique, we expect supplies for Zambia of consignment of Russian food worth 648 tons, yellow split peas. Besides, until the end of the year, we plan to have a consignment of high vitamin sunflower seed oil, some 94 tons. Russia will continue supporting our partners in Africa. One more important topic. Within the 8th session of the Artek Child Camp, as well as dedicated to the 100th anniversary of the Center and the public diplomacy, a child program, BRICS World, the World of the Future, took place. It brought together more than 150 children from BRICS plus countries. The main aim is to establish a platform of a new format for cooperation and joint work of talented children and teenagers. The main event of the program is the creation of the Child's Declaration of the World. It's a document prepared by the participants of this project, and it is addressed to the world community with call on cooperation, mutual respect, seizure of conflicts, and joint responsibility for the future of the planet. The final version was approved by 3,200 participants of this session from 76 countries. It is planned to be spread as an official document during the 80th session of the UNGA. According Under the instruction of the Russian president, St. Petersburg on October 8th and 9th will host the first event within the Russian International Creative Seasons. The symposium will be participated by representatives of federal bodies, international business community, and experts. The program is divided into 3 blocks: society, technology, and global cooperation. The latter is supported by the Foreign Ministry. This forum is a response to the issues and challenges of modern times from various spheres of life, and both public and political, that people in Russia and the countries of the global majority care about. In Russia, they see an alternative to neoliberal pseudo-values. They destroy national sovereignties, perennial foundations of great civilizations. I'm sure that the forum will help develop contacts and expert discussions on relevant issues for the future of the whole humanity. This event will be a meeting of like-minded people who want to build a more just world. There's one more announcement, useful for you in my opinion. This is an announcement of the International Conference on Creative Economy. St. Petersburg on October 8th and 9th will host the first event within the Russian International Creative Season, the International Conference on Creative Economy. It is organized by the Agency of Strategic Initiatives together with the administration of St. Petersburg and the Roscongress Foundation. The conference is expected to be participated by some 1,500,000 delegates from 30 countries, including the CIS, SCO, and BRICS countries. The event will bring together representatives from state bodies, business representatives, and experts. The key topics of the conference cover the future of the creative economy until 2040. The upcoming event is a unique platform for global international cooperation and integration of Russian creative economy into the world market. What is the creative economy? For the first time, the terms creative economy and creative industry were introduced at the turn of the 21st century. Back then, the list of sectors of the creative economy included a number of and areas of activities like advertisement, marketing, architecture, design, including fashion, software development, publishing, media, and some others. In 2024, the federal law on development of creative industries in the Russian Federation was passed. This law, besides the above-mentioned areas, outlined a number of creative spheres based on historic and cultural heritage, including arts and crafts. This is something I like very much. We invite all the journalists, foreign journalists accredited in Russia, to participate in covering this event. This is not discrimination, but I just think that foreigners will be more interested in this. As per usual, the link will be available in the text of the briefing. I am ready to take a question. Is the International Affairs Journal with us? Good afternoon, Madam Zakharova. Good afternoon. Prime Minister of Poland, Donald Tusk, said and acknowledge that there is a conflict with Russia of a new kind. I would like to quote, "We didn't want this. It's sometimes strange to realize that it is a new type of war, but it's still a war," he said. What can you say about this? I don't see anything new here. This is just a fact. The only thing I don't like is that they did not want it. Who wanted it then? If the situation in Ukraine wasn't arranged by Warsaw as well for the last 10 years, it was not only Warsaw, sometimes individually or collectively together with other NATO countries, or sometimes through Warsaw. It happened in various combinations, but the role of Warsaw in this was leading. There is no doubt about it. Warsaw regularly, at all levels, in all senses, participated in the situation in Ukraine, so that this situation is exacerbated. I cannot agree that they did not want it. If they say this, they have to understand that they lie. Now, they destabilized the situation in Ukraine. They provoked the crisis. On their territory, they trained militants for Maidan. They influenced political and internal political decision-making in Ukraine. They provided political concepts and their implementation on the territory of Ukraine. They disregarded our concerns and warnings. They have financed and continue doing so. They finance, but how did he say, the hybrid war, the war of a new type? They provide armaments and weapons to Ukraine, turn the blind eye to participation of their mercenaries in hostilities. They respond very emotionally sometimes to historic issues, without understanding that they have direct ties with the current situation. For some reason, they think that neo-Nazi gang in Ukraine has appeared, and for some reason Ukrainians have to pay tribute to the victims of the Volyn massacre. You cannot glorify people who committed crimes against many people, including the Poles, and on the other side to honor the memory of victims. That cannot happen, neither theoretically nor practically. We remember the heroic deeds of our grandchildren and great-grandchildren. The decisions of the Nuremberg Tribunal cannot be revised. The memory is sacred for us. Collaborations will never be glorified. We proceed from these ideas. We honor the memory of victims. We preserve the memory of heroes. We do not try and glorify collaborationists. We held national courts against collaborationists, but it happened otherwise in Ukraine, and it was sponsored in many cases by Warsaw. But Warsaw cannot understand the origin of the hatred to historic facts in the Kiev regime. This dichotomy does not lead to anything good. This, by the way, shows the contradiction that the Prime Minister of Poland said when he said that they did not want war. But how come they did not want it? They had been preparing for it. They had provoked it. They thought it would went the other way. That is the fact. They thought that given all the circumstances, a very quick victory would be ensured. That's what we have to talk about. But they did want it. There is no doubt about it. Thank you very much. Thanks to you. Let us move on. Is Ria Novosti with us? Good afternoon, Madam Zakharova. If I may, we have two questions today. The first one. I'm sorry, Christina, I couldn't find my red jacket, but I can see it on you today. Yes, if you're not against it, I allowed myself to wear it today. So question one. On September 22, Vladimir Putin promoted an initiative providing for the sites to continue complying with the restrictions under the New START treaty until after 2026. Is this an invitation to prolong the treaty? This is not really so. The Russian side did not want to find creative ways to partly prolong the New START treaty as a legally binding document. The treaty itself does not provide for an option to prolong it for the second time. This would require new negotiations and hypothetical agreements, but the New START treaty will only be suspended. We enshrined it legally, and some issues have not been settled. To get rid of obstacles, we need more time and more solid foundation in relations between Russia and the US. We are early on in our normalization. These factors should be accounted for. But in the life cycle of the New START treaty will finish in February 2026. According to the reasons put forward by President of the Russian Federation, we propose acting beyond this framework of the treaty. We're talking only about preserving, after February 2026, those voluntary self-restrictions under which Russia acts even now. It is viable only under the condition that the US side will go on with status quo in this area and won't violate restrictions on the deterrent potentials. This would help both nuclear powers their responsibility in ensuring security and the prevention of arms race. That would be good for all the international community as well.
Thank you so much. And if the second question, if I may, you may. Foreign Minister of Czechia, Mr. Lipavsky, said the government of the Czech Republic took the decision to ban the entry to its territory through international airports for the possessors of Russian diplomatic and service passports. Madam Zakharova, could you comment on it, please? Well, you know, we've seen these statements and these reports. We took note of them. But up until now, we haven't received any official notifications from the Czech side. You wouldn't believe it. So we have no details about these unfriendly actions so far. And I would like to draw your attention that the Czech authorities imposed strong restrictions in this field a couple of years ago. You might know about it. the Russian diplomats, apart from the members of the embassies in Prague, don't receive any visas. So probably it's more of a PR campaign ahead of the parliamentary elections, which will take place from the 3rd to the 4th of October, that is tomorrow and the day after tomorrow. And apparently they needed an information campaign which would simulate their active activities. Well, seriously speaking, Prague should understand that the Russian side will always respond to an unfriendly campaign and steps. For example, the embassy of Czech Republic in Moscow might face difficulty with sending their experts over to Moscow in order to resolve immediate technical issues. Is Izvestia with us? Yes, good afternoon. We have just one question today. What do you think, what would be the next steps of the international sports community after the rights of Russian Paralympic athletes have been restored? Well, we definitely welcome the decision of the General Assembly of the Intergovernmental Paralympic Committee about the full restoration of the membership of the Paralympic Committee of Russia in this world organization. We see that it was just a victory of common sense that most delegates of the General Assembly of the International Paralympic Committee took this decision. It is a return to the true ideals of sports without any forms of discrimination for political and national reasons. Now Russian Paralympic athletes will be able to participate with their flags, with the anthem, and with other state symbols in the Paralympic Games and in competitions in various sports, be it athletics, swimming, powerlifting, stage hockey, or bullseye shooting. We hope the restrictions will be soon lifted for Russian athletes for all Paralympic sports, and they will be able to perform in the Paralympic, to compete in the Paralympic Games in Italy in 2026. We hope the International Olympic Committee and international federations for other sports will demonstrate common sense and provide all countries and all athletes equal opportunities for them to compete in a fair struggle based on the acts of international law which regulate the activities. Thank you so much. Is Artie with us? Artie Balkan. Yes, good afternoon. The Serb public community follows the developments related to the U.S. sanctions against the Serb oil industry and oil sector. The Russian side has a majority stake in the oil field in the country. In January this year, when sanctions were imposed against NIS, Sergei Lavrov said this oil company could not be nationalized. So the question is, to what extent is Moscow now engaged in communication with Belgrade and with Washington regarding the future of the company, taking into account that the U.S. sanctions, according to the official reports, expire on the 8th and 9th of October. Thank you. Well, I can only say that representatives of the Russian side are in close dialogue with the Serb partners and dialogues and are to get jointly engaged in talks with the U.S. in order to settle the situation, taking into account the interests of the Russian investor and the key provisions of the agreement between the government of our country and the government of Serbia on cooperation in the oil and gas sphere from the 25th of January 2008. If we have any further details, we'll provide them to you. Thank you. Is Media Corporation of China with us? Yes, good afternoon, Madam Zakharova. I have two questions today. The first is as follows. In China, the 8-day-long holiday period started, which enacts two holidays: the Day of Establishment of the People's Republic of China and the Mid-Autumn Festival, usually to the driver of internal and international tourism and encourages consumer activities. How would you evaluate the scale and potential of the Chinese tourism economy? Well, first allow me to use this opportunity and offer the peoples of China my best congratulations and best wishes on the occasion of these two holidays. I would like to wish them all the best. The long holidays traditionally attract many tourists. It's one of the most favorite travel periods in China. Well, I'll share my, well, not impressions, but my knowledge about the Chinese holiday. There is such a notion as a triad of Chinese holidays, and one of the pillars is the cycle of autumn holidays we're talking about today. And indeed, many use this opportunity in order to travel to China, through China. Well, I'm not sure. I have to evaluate the tourist potential, the potential of the tourist area. It's probably for our Chinese colleagues to do it, and it's for us to use these opportunities. Especially now that there are lots of opportunities for this today, which is to which only contributes the decision about the non-visa travel regime for our tourists in particular. There are lots of places and sites to visit with long traditions, with beautiful natural landscapes, with exquisite cuisine. We have such a notion as golden autumn, and in China, for example, there is a notion of the holiday of red leaves. It is a literal translation from Chinese, and it is a very special period in the year cycle of natural cycle and the holiday cycle. So there are many things to look at and to see. So I can only wish to our Chinese friends who celebrate these holidays all the best, and I wish new impressions, new bright impressions to those who travel to China these days. Thank you. And my second question, if I may. President of the US, Donald Trump, recently on the 29th of September said he was going to impose 100% import duty on non-US movies. In Truth Social, he said movie-making businesses have been stolen from the US by other countries, just like stealing candy from a baby. It's the second time he's been raising this issue after his statement of the 4th of May. What's your comment on that? How can it influence the global movie industry? Well, on the one hand, many people smiled when they read this piece of news, because US representatives have been spoken for many decades about the power of Hollywood, and it was justified. It is indeed a very strong industry, a strong business, a great established system for promotion and production. So it is a real grand empire, movie empire. But on the other hand, if we looked into it, if we look into these details of the statement, I understand, I realize his concern. I believe he's talking about the attempts of the US authorities to return the production of holiday movies which are now produced abroad, not in the territory of the US. I think a lot has been already said on this occasion. The ultra-liberal agenda destroys, erodes the US movie industry, but I think he's primarily talking about the production process, which was located outside the US. I think it's just another sphere where the incumbent US authorities want to make America great again. So I'm not sure there is something for me to comment on here. I only decipher the sense which I see in these statements. All the rest, let's leave it to the critics, to observers, to the experts of the sphere, or just fans, for them to give their assessments to specific movies and the general state of the film industry. I can only add what is quite obvious. We've been talking about for a long time the movie industry in the West and the culture on the whole, and certain arts in particular, were under the burden of the ultra-liberal agenda, the extremist ideology of LGBT with all additional letters. This distorted idea about the human rights, manipulation of census, promotion of political narratives which were favorable or attractive in terms of internal political situation in the US, a twisting with historical facts and presenting the false facts in the whole.
Мы говорили о том, что это не приведет к развитию кинематографа, и не только кинематографа, но и в целом культуры, искусства, что это приведет к обратному, не только к кризису в этой сфере. Этот кризис станет отражением кризиса в обществе, кризиса в душах людей, в их сердцах.